challenged artists among us to diversify sufficiently that you are able to serve your community, you are able to be citizens and to be civic, but you are also able to make art for its own sake.
Yes.
You know, because we're so busy talking about how are we going to make a living doing this, that the important work that art does in terms of giving meaning and asking questions of a deeper philosophical bent, if you will, is often lost.
Yes, and I don't mean to say that that's something that you should sacrifice. Yeah, no, I think it's fine. I think what you give is a perfect example of a portfolio that an artist can put together. And so if you think about everything in your life, the things that are important to you, we think about how to support that, how to support our children, how do we support our faith-based organizations that we participate in, or PTA or community organizations that we really care about. If your thing is how to support your art, that's what you can figure out how to do by putting together a strong art, revenue portfolio.
Well, and speaking about Dashboard Co-op again, we're trying to figure out sort of how we got where we are and what the mission's going to be. Because when it started, that was not about revitalizing spaces and occupancy, all that sort of stuff. It was like, hey, we've got some artist friends that don't have places to show. The galleries aren't accepting them. Where do I have an outlet for this creativity, for these arts that I've got pent up inside me? But then fairly quickly realized that, after leaving the first venue, that folks were very interested in that space because they had been made aware of it and seen it in a different light rather than for-lease sign, cobwebs, broken toilet, all just sort of broken down. It's like, hey, well, somebody's come in and put a little bit of investment in it, but more they've just sort of brought people to the space and shown off what it is, what it could be. So I think now the statistic is something like 90% of the spaces that Dashboard's been through in the past 3 years have been occupied. The space we're in now is occupied. The space across the street, spaces along Edgewood Avenue really taken off. And it's something to grapple with because it's not Dashboard does not want to be a real estate, broker or agent or leasing folks, that sort of stuff. But understand that a problem to a certain extent has been solved or is being solved. But I think part of it's too because that's there, then the whole time, or at least since very early on, the artists have been paid for what they do. It's not, hey, can we get some free art in here to make this free sort of thing work out? The only thing that's been free is the event itself, to have people come. There's no barrier of entry. You don't have to go within a white-walled concrete box or whatever else to check out the art. It's trying to engage and participate with the community. The artists are getting paid for the hard work they're doing to put the stuff there. The landlords are going to do okay at the end of the day, but up front, they're not going to get any sort of revenue. They're actually being asked for more stuff. Like, we're going to start turning on your power, and you're going to start paying the utility bill. Okay, but there's the track record, that sort of portfolio that's been created that says, hey, this might work. No guarantees. Your results may vary, but we're going to do what we do with the art, and you're not going to be allowed to curate the space. You're not determining, I don't think that's going to show off, what I want to do and sort of pitch. The space is there. The artists react to the space. They get paid for the work they do. The public gets involved. The community gets engaged. You move on to the next space, and you let the chips fall where they are. But so far, the chips have fallen pretty well.
That's super interesting.
Well, and now folks in other cities, like I've been in this room before with folks from all over the country who were here for the National Planning Association conference. And they're all like, well, what can we hire you? Can we bring you in? Like their Dashboard's this mercenary group that goes around and fixes up spaces. Which, it's interesting, and it's a different sort of business model that wasn't envisioned by the co-founders when they started off. But is there something, either some scalability or some piece of that can be turned into a program that can be repeated somewhere else? Like, can we go back and learn from what sort of happened to fall into place and do that somewhere else, or not? But I think we're moving sort of in that direction. There is some stuff that we've sort of learned in hindsight that, hey, that seemed to work pretty well. Continuing to work with other folks and participating, what can we do going forward? So it doesn't become this routine, and now, okay, this real estate agent or this landlord is going to hire a Dashboard to come in and fix their space. We're not there to, pimp my building or flip my space. but that there's a market reality out there that's looking for that, and how can those relationships still sort of play out where it's not a patron model per se, but it's something that provides some funding and allows Dashboard to do what Dashboard wants to do, knowing that there's this potentially sort of beautiful after effect once it's done.
Well, I have to say I like that model right now of finding the spaces, because there's a lot of space open in Atlanta, and I know for the events that we put on, we come with no budget, and it's like, well, you're not doing anything with the space here. Let's do something this day, just one day, and so that's great that you're able to put some of that space to use.
I find that tension really interesting between. I mean, I tell the Dashboard story a lot, and probably in a way Dashboard does not want the story being told, right? Because it's the story of the power of the arts to transform communities. But it's different than the mission of the organization, because the mission is not to flip spaces. So when we're talking to a business community, we want to say 11 of the 12 spaces have flipped. That's going to be a really interesting time. I'm very curious to see how that plays out.
Well, I think that's the same thing that you're bringing up with the country club versus civic organization thing. It's kind of like both and, but the question becomes what comes first, right? So, it's with Dashboard, obviously the first intent is the mission, right? The arts, and then you have this after effect. And I think for arts organizations that are struggling with that, the financial perspective versus the mission and the desire to create art. You have to really be honest that it's both and be smart about balance. I think what happens with a lot of organizations that wind up really suffering badly is they get so focused on the financial part and the country club aspect of it and the patronage and all of that they totally lose sight of their mission. And then the organization doesn't really exist anymore. Then really all it is a social club. That occasionally, that does artsy things, and and it's sad, you lose a lot of great organizations and great missions that way, and so, but I think, like you're saying, Kyle, you have to be honest and be aware of the benefits of both things and find balance in that and be responsible for it too, what your intention is.
I mean, and there have definitely been some spaces that have been offered up, because folks don't know, they know the Dashboard's out there now. And like, hey, this is the answer to my prayers. I just need to convince these folks to come into my building, put their art in it, and magically it's going to work out. And we've said no, like it just doesn't work out. And I think part of it's just capacity-wise. We can't do every vacant space in the whole city of Atlanta. But I think through the relationships and just communication, you can flesh out those ulterior motives. And lots of the time, because there are so many spaces available, Dashboard can go out and find a space that we think will work well, that will do what the mission is trying to do, versus, we think this landlord, we can convince him, to give us the space for free, and that's not going to work out. But there's a space, there's a community we're interested in, there's an artist that we're interested in working in, can we find a space that's going to work well for that? And then hopefully everything will continue to work out well if it's not the tail wagging the dog, if you will.
Any questions, comments? I used to have a teacher say, any questions, comments, concerns?
It's a lot of card.
Yeah. Well,
we should go hit the road now and tell more people about hip-hop and public art.
Tell the elderly people, aging people.
That's all I'm going to be talking about for the next week now.
We can all go to Elevate.
There's some Elevate happening right now. So.
I know, I feel bad that we're here instead of it up.
It's going on right now, so y'all leave here and head over there.
Check it out.
Well, thank you.
I've been at this thing for a minute, and this whole placemaking and art influencing placemaking, and I'm are you optimistic? Is it really happening, or is it what we want? Is it or is it that we want it to be happening that we think it's happening? Is Elevate having an influence in a substantial way of what's happening in downtown? Or do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I think
I'm feeling a little pessimistic right now.
Yeah. I think Elevate's in its 4th year.
Yes, it is.
And what we were talking about,
Still going up.
It's still going up, and it's still finding its way. placemaking, the model for placemaking really is more about community engagement than it is about the project itself. And I think when Elevate started, it was about the project. And I think that it has evolved into really being more about community engagement and really making a place and bringing people in this year more so than any year before. And so I'm optimistic as long as the conversation is focused on evolution, on being smart, on looking at trends. I mean, that's what Greg is talking about here is really being aware of what's happening in the larger conversation about placemaking. Now, if Elevate devolves into just being about this event that happens once a year, however it happens, then you're right, it's not going to be important.
I think it's also how you operationally define your outcomes. Because if you're not defining your outcomes and you're allowing your outcomes to be defined for you, you're going to lose control of it, right? And people are going to impose their own wants, wishes, and desires for what it is that you're trying to do. So I think if you define the outcomes, and they may change over time, it's really hard. There's a book called No Culture, No Future by Simon Bro, and I actually had the pleasure of seeing him speak in Toronto a couple of years ago. And one of the things that he said is that you're going to have a hard time convincing your neighbor to go see a play because it's good for the economy, right? But that's what we focus on, and it doesn't hold water because if you put the arts up against other economic engines, like say youth soccer, you still may not even reach the same impact, right? But we keep talking about economic impact, which is important. I'm not saying it's not important, but what I'm saying in terms of how we think about, we define objectives, then maybe it's time to think a little bit more about the intrinsic objectives that we're defining. And I think that's what community-based art helps, building a membership, being open, having people who are comfortable enough being transgendered, who coming in and, being with a community of people and feeling welcome, and thinking about, aging, and thinking about, how to uphold a mission, and thinking about how you are responsive to a public art initiative so that it is reaching the community and it's not just placed into a community. Mm-hmm. So, I think we have a long way to go in how we measure our impact, but I think if we can start thinking as a community about what are the things that we're operationally defining and start keeping an eye on those.
I think part of it's the context of where the question's being asked. We're talking about, I love Atlanta, I love the mayor. Maybe more than you. When I think of we're in Atlanta talking about if placemaking is really a thing. And we've got some great projects in Atlanta. When I think of Flux, I think in a couple of years, that's already really big for Atlanta. And it is big for the South. But when I think of, Project Row Houses, he won a MacArthur Genius Award this year. Yeah. When I think of, the thing in, I keep forgetting what it's called, the name of the district in Miami, where they put in all the murals?
Wynwood. Art Basel or Art Deco?
Not Art Basel.
Wynwood Walls.
No, Wynwood, where they've got all the murals. If I look at other places around the country that are really doing placemaking, it's not at the scale that we're talking about in Atlanta. It's a much broader scale. And it's one of the reasons you're seeing some of the biggest funders in the country. The NEA has started a huge Our Town placemaking fund. The biggest funders in the country are investing in Art Place. Mm-hmm. So nationally, you're seeing a real shift towards placemaking. That money's not coming back to Atlanta.
It sure is.
Well, I will disagree. So Atlanta did get an Our Town grant. We did an Our Town grant this year.
Art on the Beltline.
It was Art on the Beltline, and so that's what I was going to say. That we're focusing on downtown. And we're talking about Elevate and Dash and Flux. However, the Beltline is really our best example of placemaking for the city.
A hugely successful. That's a national model.
It is. But to your point, I think we could be thinking bigger. You know, and so that's what I'm saying. Elevate as an idea. It's where it started is not where it is today, and I think there's room for it to be analyzed in comparison to the larger conversation.
I want to see original research come out of the city of Atlanta.